I think it's really important that we sort of let our husbands find their own space and be grateful that they want to be involved at all. Moms, if your husbands offer to do something, don't micromanage it. Let them run with it and do it, and don't tell them what to do. If it's a mess, it's a mess. But they've been involved in their kids' lives. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Before we begin today's episode, I just want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you watch or listen, including YouTube, and leave us a review if this podcast has encouraged you. Leaving a good review helps other homeschool parents like you find our podcast. And as always, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Today, I'm really excited about our episode. We're doing something different today. We are answering your questions. I'll be answered by Nancy Manos, one of my very closest BFFs and homeschooling mom of 13 years, Nancy, 12 years?
14, somewhere
14,
in there.
somewhere in there.
All the way through high school.
Yes, all the way. Homeschooled both of our girls all the way through high school. Joe and I homeschooled our 3 children from kindergarten through high school too. So if nothing else, we have experience. So we're going to do our best today to answer your questions. And let me just remind you to continue to send questions to us. And Nancy will talk about that in a few minutes.
When my family started our homeschooling journey, there were so many decisions to make. But one of our best decisions was choosing to use BJU Press Homeschool. I've never seen my kids so excited to get textbooks before. I'm amazed by how interesting and interactive the lessons are. My kids actually look forward to them. We use the online video lessons for all our courses, but I know some families choose to teach from the textbooks. What I love is that I can trust BJU Press to uphold our values. The Bible and biblical principles are woven throughout each subject. I'll admit, I was a bit nervous when I started homeschooling, but I've found a wonderful online community of other BJU Press homeschool families and consultants. The Homeschool Hub also makes my job easier. I can set up our schedules and rearrange them with just a few clicks. On the dashboard, I can see each of my kids' progress, and the assignments page shows me quickly what's ready for me to check or grade. I'm glad my son's biology assignments are automatically graded. BJU Press Homeschool has given us the tools and confidence to homeschool our children. For more information, do what I did and visit the BJU Press Homeschool website or talk with your local HomeWorks consultant.
We are so excited. I know you and I both, Zan, over the years, we've had lots of opportunities to talk to moms and to dads and to speak and answering questions and sharing from our experience to encourage those that are, coming up and in the middle of homeschooling. It's such a blessing for us to be able to share what God has given us in our experience and all of that, to be able to encourage somebody else, because we remember those days. Yes. We remember when someone else spoke into our life and helped us to keep going or to find a solution for a challenge we were having. And so this is a really fun episode that we're doing where we get to answer some questions. So we do have this awesome app where you can voice record your question. So we're going to play the first question, and then Zan and I are going to take a stab at answering it. It's going to be great.
Hi, my name is Denise. I have a question about homeschooling. I'm homeschooling because I'm kind of out of the box, don't like the public school system, don't even like school system the way it's actually set up. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions on alternatives to colleges, as I'm not crazy about sending my girl off to maybe the public school setting after we've homeschooled through 12th grade.
So I would tell you, first of all, I did a podcast with Jonathan Brush of Unbound. It's project-based education with robust Christian leadership training. And so you can go back and listen to our podcast, but he gives you a lot of different alternatives to college. And he has programs for 9th through 11th grade, 12th grade, post-high school. And I think that would really be an encouragement to you. One thing that a lot of homeschoolers are doing now is starting their own businesses. So entrepreneurship is huge in the homeschooling community, and we'll talk about that more in a minute.
For our family, by the time my girls were 14, 15, I could tell based on their interests and their passions that they were not likely to pursue a career path that would require like higher level math or science. And at that time, neither of them had an interest in going to college. But it was important to me and to my husband that we prepared them so they could go to college if they decided to. So things like, research study skills, being a good writer, knowing how to learn, things that would prepare you to be able to take college classes if they wanted to. And so, there were some things like I let them quit after Algebra 1. Our youngest actually decided she wanted to learn geometry after that. But so we kind of made decisions based on what we could see in their teen years, while also leaving the door open for them to go to college, assuming that if we hadn't done a lab science or we hadn't done a higher level math class, they could take that at the community college and then go on to college if they decided to. And neither ended up doing that, but at least they were prepared and they had that option if they wanted it. A lot of for us was leaving time in their schedule for them to pursue their interests, to do internships, to have jobs, to volunteer, and things like that. And so there's a lot of ways to get really good life experience that don't necessarily involve a college.
With our children, and I thought it was interesting in the question, she said, I'm not crazy about sending my girl off to the public school setting. And so I do want to say there are some Christian colleges out there that would not simulate the public school setting. So all three of my kids were interested in careers that required a college degree. And so we were all three of them went to Christian colleges. One graduated from a Christian school, and then the other transferred back to USC to get to finish their degrees in a field, in a particular field. And my middle son went to law school, and so he had to have particular things. But I do want to say that sometimes Christian school is a great option, and you can do that at home with all most of these colleges are offering everything online now as well, so you're not sending them into an environment that you're not going to like, and you can monitor what they're learning in their courses. So I think that's a really good option. But so Joe and I started a homeschooling organization back in the 90s that's still going strong, where we do a lot of counseling for high school students. And one of the things that I really liked that Nancy said, well, all of the things Nancy says I always like, but when she was talking about figuring out what your children are interested in and helping them make those decisions, college, the price of college now is so out of reach for so many people, and student debt has become such an issue that if your kids don't know what they want to do, a lot of students now are taking gap years, and they're particularly doing that with Christian organizations. And so that's a great way for a child to figure out what they want to do with their lives post high school. They have that year where if they've won scholarships, most colleges will defer those scholarships that first year, and then they can pick them up the year after that. So I think that's really helpful as well. And then one thing I loved that Nancy said is you don't know if you have a kid who said, I never want to go to college. And I've had this happen with three of my close friends. And then the child decides their senior year they want to go to college. Well, then you can have some, you might have a year of courses that you're going to need to make up there. And community colleges, and now there's some Christian schools who are actually making the lab sciences and the math in particular available to kids who may change their mind. And then there are other kids who start their own businesses and do their own thing and never look back.
It's so amazing what is available to us and our kids as homeschoolers. And so that's the thing, is to know that God's going to lead you and guide you. And there are so many options. And I love that. Okay. Thank you for that question, Danique. That was really, I hope that's encouraging to Zan's listeners. Okay, our next question.
Hi, Zan. This is Nicole from the KC metro area. My question would be, how would you encourage fathers to get involved with homeschooling more, or what would you tell a mom that is doing most of the homeschooling to do to get the father more encouraged and involved in that with their children?
You know, that is a great question. And I think there are tons of levels and tons of ways that dads can be involved. Now, I know we had the chairman of our homeschool board in South Carolina was a pediatric surgeon, and they had 8 kids. And so when they decided to homeschool, Steve totally rearranged his schedule, his surgical schedule, and would go in to the hospital 5 to 9, come home for 3 or 4 hours, homeschool the kids that were in high school, and then go back to work. So that's an example of a dad who was really, really involved in every aspect of homeschooling. I would say that's unusual. And my husband Joe traveled a lot while we were homeschooling, but I really appreciated that he was working and gave me the freedom to stay home. Now, we lived on one income, and I'm not going to say that was always easy, or that we didn't pinch a lot of pennies, but I was able to stay home, and I greatly appreciated that. So Joe's role was just really different. We didn't have cell phones then, so I couldn't call him when things went askew or amiss, but he was very involved in the kids' lives. So I always called him the chiropractor in charge of attitude adjustment. There was just something about Joe after a long week or several hard days of homeschooling. He could come in and just make everybody happy. Listen to everybody's grievances, change the subject, do something fun. I don't know. I just needed that break that he gave me, when he was home, and when he came home, he never sat down and watched television. He came home and played with the kids or figured out what needed to be done or who needed, help with what. So I think it's really important that we sort of let our husbands find their own space and be grateful that they want to be involved at all. I know Todd Wilson, and Todd has done a podcast for us before. The Family Man is his podcast. Todd always says, moms, if your husbands offer to do something, don't micromanage it. Let them
Yep.
run with it and do it, and don't tell them what to do. If it's a mess, it's a mess, but they've been involved in their kids' lives. So those are just some of my thoughts. Nancy, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, we have a lot in common. James traveled a lot during the first 20 years of our marriage, and was home on the weekends, or every other week he was home a few days. And he was also like, if our oldest and I butted heads quite often because we're very similar in our personalities. 2 strong women in the same home. That's awesome. And you can survive that and have a great friendship. It's amazing. But there were times where we would have a hard time, especially math, for whatever reason, was an area of conflict. And we were having a conflict one day, and James was working from home, and he's upstairs, and he comes down and he's like, time out. Mommy, go to your room. Olivia, go to your room. And he would do the okay, I'll listen. What do you see? What's happening? What's the challenge here? And then he'd come talk to me, and then he'd help us work it out. So he was kind of the problem solver and the peacemaker. And he
I
helped us
like
take a
that,
step back.
peacemaker. That's the yes.
It is
I
the
like
role
that.
of the principal to keep peace in the home. At least it was in ours. And it was
Yes.
so great because then we didn't have this ongoing unresolved conflict. We actually had someone help us talk it through. So we both felt heard, and it helped me to kind of remind myself, okay, she is a teenager, or whatever age she was, and she's becoming, and I needed to step outside myself and the current frustration and be reminded that I'm helping to shape her and nurture her. And so he was amazing at that. He also wasn't involved in the educating of the children, but he was amazing at encouraging me, making sure that I was able to go to the homeschool convention. He was the dish man. He always has been in our marriage. So if I
Yes,
cooked,
amen to
he
that.
would do the dishes. It was amazing. Or if I didn't have a dinner plan, which it's better if you do, but if you don't, he would come up with the solution, because by the end of the day, you are done sometimes. And then, like, for us, he had a thing where it was called Queen of the Couch Night. On Thursday nights, all my favorite shows were on. I put on my pajamas, I got a snack, I watched TV, and I didn't have to hear the word mom for the next 3 hours. And he put them to bed and all that stuff. And so just the partnership, I think, it may
Yes,
not be the
yes.
educating, it might be the supporting your wife. But sometimes dads don't have that vision. And I know in the beginning, like James was even like, do we need to spend money on curriculum? Like, once he caught the vision for what we were doing, then it was like, if it's a sacrifice, we're going to set aside money so you can buy the tools that you need to teach the girls. And so, like, that feels like a lot of support too, when you're not doing the teaching and also having to convince someone that you need to spend a little to get some tools and resources. And it doesn't need to be expensive, but if you're fighting for resources, that can feel, then you add tension in your marriage too that doesn't need to be there, right?
That's
We're on the
right.
same
That's right.
team. We're educating our children because, we see the beauty of homeschooling and the blessing of homeschooling. And so I just felt like James, that was his role. But there are some amazing ways to get dads, if they don't already have the vision for why homeschooling is beneficial for your family, listen to Todd Wilson's podcast. There's some great guests that Zan has had on her podcast, including her husband, Joe, that are super encouraging. But if your husband will listen to some podcasts or go to the homeschool convention with you and hear some of the dad speakers, those are a couple things. But just invite them in. It can't just be the mom's thing, right? Like, we're doing this together, even if your husband isn't part of the sitting down and doing, school.
That's right. That is so good, Nancy, because I would say partnership is just the best word, because we were always partners. Now, some of you moms, I mean, when we started homeschooling, and Joe talks about this in one of our podcasts, I mean, he called himself a homeschool agnostic. He wasn't sure if he believed in it or not, but he told me, he said, I know you love Jesus and you love our kids, and I totally trust what you want to do with them. And so as the years went on, just like James, he just became a raving homeschool fanatic, mainly because of the lifestyle. When he was
Yes.
traveling, we still had a lot of time together. We could mold our education around when he was home and do, it was great. One thing that we did a lot, and Joe couldn't always do this with me, but he was really a part of our planning process. I would try to take a day at the beginning of every school year and just really commit the year to the Lord, look through, what issues did my kids have the year before? Were there character issues we needed to work on? Were there subjects we needed to shore up? Or, what did I need to do differently this year, and what did the plan look like? And so Joe would be real involved with me in terms of just helping me plan some. And so if your husband's not involved in the planning, communicate your planning with them. Maybe just have
Yeah.
a date night where you say, this is my vision for our homeschool this year. What do you think? And do what you said, Nancy. Invite them in, draw them in, so they don't feel like they're on the outside looking in.
Yeah. And when you said date night, it reminded me of, we started homeschooling because of a friendship that we had with another couple, and they were homeschooling. And so by spending time with them, we both caught the vision for what homeschooling could be. And so if you know a couple where the dad is really supportive and involved and engaged, maybe do a double date, where your husband can spend time with that dad as well, and see what it's like from somebody who's already committed and got the vision for this. I think having people in our life that are a little further along can be a great inspiration to us. And so we need it. One of the funniest things that happened when we were homeschooling was, I knew James wasn't going to be able to teach any of the subjects, but I assumed he would do driver's training. And then he he took each of the girls on one outing, and they were like, "We are never driving with him again." A way that was not their style. And so I ended up like terrified having to do driver's training with both girls, but it was great. But it's so funny because even sometimes you think, oh, my husband will take care of that. And it might be not the right fit. But then there are ways, like I have a friend who the dad teaches math to the teens and he teaches all of his kids piano. So, maybe there is something your husband is passionate about and could do, even if it's on the weekends. So just, we're praying for your families. Like there are amazing opportunities for us as couples to come together and to find a rhythm and a routine that makes sense and is a good fit for your family. So
Just a few other things. So Nancy had girls. I had two boys and then a girl. And but Joe was a college athlete and my boys were really strong athletes. And so Joe spent an awful lot of time in their growing up years coaching their soccer teams and baseball teams. There were no homeschool leagues like there are now. And so that was a lot of time spent together. And then when Lizzie came up and loved the fine arts, Joe spent a whole lot of time with her down at the community theater the nights he was home or on weekends before a performance because he just didn't want her down there by herself. So, we did a lot of pinch hitting to get kids where they needed to go when you've got a lot of children going in a lot of different directions. And so well, I think Joe's told his Latin story course. He taught a Latin course to Lizzie one year. We probably don't have time to go into that right now.
It's a great story, though. You should give the highlights. Share the high points of that.
Okay, I'll share the high points. We had a Spanish teacher in the neighborhood who was fabulous, and but Lizzie wanted to take Latin. I'd never had Latin. Joe had some Greek and some Latin in college, so he was the teacher. So he bought this cassette program, Arte Latine. I'm sure I just butchered that pronunciation, from the University of Michigan. And so it was totally self-paced. So Lizzie finished the first week. Daddy, do you want to check my work? He was out of town. Oh, no, Lizzie, I trust you. Go get the teacher's manual. Daddy, do you want to check my test? Oh, no, Lizzie, corrected. I trust you. So all of Latin goes that way for either 2 or 3 years. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years. Lizzie was totally on her own with her daddy's blessing. So she goes to college and takes the placement course in college. And she comes out there. She was so mad at her dad. She said, Dad did not prepare me for that test. Well, she didn't understand that this wasn't like you're going to make 100 or a 0. But they test way above what anybody knows. And she exempted out of several courses in Latin. But he told Lizzie after that, Lizzie, my desire and goal was for you to own your education and for you to be independent in your education. And I accomplished that. So, so that was one of those Todd Wilson things where I just stood back and watched this unfold. And I actually knew she was learning something in the process. So.
Right. Yes. And that really is. It's okay that we have a different approach from our husband.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something about moms too, like, first of all, we've done all this work and we want to protect it. Like we want to protect our kids. Oh, you're doing it wrong. We need to sometimes let them do it different. It might not be wrong. It's just different.
Yes,
and
that's
just
right.
And trusting each other. Like I loved knowing that James trusted me, even if I had a bad week or I was failing at something in raising our kids, that he trusted me, and that gave me courage. So that's a fun question. Marriage is an amazing adventure, and then you throw homeschooling in the mix, and you get
it's
to draw
a double
really
amazing adventure.
double amazing. But we draw closer to God and we draw closer to each other, which I think is really what we need. We need the Lord for all of this.
That's right.
Okay.
This is
Anything
before
else
we
on
leave.
that one? Sorry.
Yeah, I just remember this. I was interviewing Ann Miller for an article for the HSLDA court report. And Ann is the president of the huge association in Virginia, Home Educators Association of Virginia, HEAV. And I just remember her saying, I just don't like to read aloud. But my husband, Jeff, did all the read alouds for the kids. And I thought, okay, this is brilliant. That is a great way for husbands and wives to team up and think, what do I like? What don't I like? What am I good at? What am I not good at? And then you put those pieces together, and it's pretty amazing the power that happens in the home when you've got parents involved.
That's so good. I'm glad you shared that. I love the Millers.
Nancy, before we leave this question about how to get dads more involved, I just want to say something to our friends out there that are widows or single moms and just encourage you. I'm going to be doing a whole episode on the podcast on this particular topic, but we know you have special challenges without that person coming beside you. And I really believe those Bible verses are so true, where God says he's a husband to the husbandless and a father to the fatherless. And you know, my single friends have had support from grandparents or their church, or they've had, you know, just support from surprising areas. So I would tell you to look for community and look for support, but stay tuned because we're going to be doing a podcast specifically for you in the coming future.
Oh, that's so great. Okay, we have our third question that was recorded that we're going to cover today. Here we go.
Hi, this is Jennifer Pedersen, and I am just curious about record keeping and transcripts. How do you recommend keeping track of what you've done with each child each year? Right now, we're only in elementary school, but we really want to plan ahead for what this will look like for high school and being prepared for higher education. Thanks so much.
Nancy, you want to take this one first?
Sure. So, gosh, record keeping and then transcripts are, you know, your whole homeschool journey. You're making decisions. For me, the record keeping part that was most important was kind of 9th through 12th grades, which was amusing for us because we never did grade levels. So I kind of had to figure out, like, oh, when they're 14, we're going to start, you know, thinking that that's 9th grade, because we just focused on concept mastery and not grade level progression. But some of the things that I did was I did my lesson planning like in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word doc for the year. Like, these are the subjects we want to cover. This is about how long each one will take. This topic will be one semester and it'll take 3 days a week. Or, you know, I kind of mapped out the year. But then I used a lesson planning book to record what we actually did. So at the end of the year, my lesson planning book was a record. It showed all of our field trips and our PE classes and our extracurriculars, plus the lessons that we got done. And so that was a nice thing to have at the end of the year. I was not a grade person. I didn't keep grades. I didn't grade my children's work, but because I worked so closely with them, I knew, you know, I reviewed their work every day. I was sitting there working with them. And if they were struggling with something, we worked on it until they grasped that concept. And so it wasn't, you know, like, oh, you got a 70 on this, you know, and we'll move on. That's your grade for this lesson. It was more like, oh, you didn't get this math concept. Let's do it another way. Let's make sure you've got a hold of this, or a grammar or whatever. So there's different ways to approach that. And so for us, I kept samples of my kids' work. I kept art projects. You know, I had a little bucket for each girl, and I wanted to keep some highlight things. But we don't in our state. So every state has different requirements. In Arizona, there's no record keeping or reporting requirement, but some states do require a portfolio or report cards or that kind of thing. So know your state laws. And the best way to do that is to contact your statewide homeschool organization. There's a list on the homeschoolfreedom.com website. There's other places to find that. HSLDA has a map as well. But contact your state homeschool organization so you know the laws in your state and what's required. But yeah, that was kind of our approach during our whole homeschool year, was really track what we actually accomplished, and then work on things until they grasped it.
Oh, that's great. It's funny because one of my sons who knows me so well says, Mom, you don't ever want to do anything in a box. She said it's why we had a Suburban growing up and you never used a suitcase. You could just throw everything you needed in the back of a car. So I found the planners with the little grids, I would look at them and just have a panic attack. And I know that most people use them. I could not. But I was so delighted when I ran into a person in my early years of homeschooling who talked about how she did narrative planning and narrative recording. So and I'm a writer, so that kind of makes sense for me too. So I would keep I instead of just a planner with the boxes, which I did use. I mean, I had to use those some, but I would do a lot more narration in my record keeping than just we did these, we did these pages, we did these things. I mean, I knew what we had accomplished in each subject, but for some reason that was easier for me. But what Nancy said is true. Every state has some different requirements. And in South Carolina, we've got 3 different homeschool laws. I don't know how complicated or uncomplicated your state is, but we actually have an organization, SCAES, the South Carolina Association of Independent Homeschools, that will do your record keeping for you and your transcripts for you as you get into high school. And because we keep in touch with the Commission on Higher Education and people who want to take scholarships, we can help you craft your transcript in a way that meets all those requirements. And as Nancy said, there are other state organizations who do that. We will actually do that for anybody in any state. If you want to find out information, and you can go to schomeschooling.com or scaes.org. Either website goes straight to us, and find out more information on that. A couple of other things I wanted to let you know about. BJU Press has an Academy of Home Education, and you can find them at Academy of Home Education on the web, and they will keep records for you, and you can find out their requirements there. HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, hslda.org, also has a transcript service, I think, that is available for their members. So there are all kinds of ways you can keep transcripts. And like Nancy says, some states require portfolios, some don't. I'm like Nancy. I've kept a lot of books and a lot of workbooks, a lot of papers, those types of things. It's probably time for me to clean those out. I'm sure Nancy did a better job of culling the important things out of there. But if you can have your own style. This is one thing I want to say to you. When you get to high school, and no matter whether your child's going to college or into the military or employment, sometimes people will want to see your transcript, regardless of whether they're college bound or not. And one of the things that has become important in the last decade or so is just community service. And homeschoolers really abound in community service. So I would say with extracurricular activities, community service, and books read in your home, that you keep an ongoing list of those things. Your kids can keep up with it. But, one year I realized I just had to take 3 days out, go through all of our calendars and all of my planners, and figure out what books were read, where we did a lot of community service, how many hours we spent in that, because we had a college who actually wanted that information. And so make sure you have a running tally of your community service, your field trips, your extracurricular activities, and your kids' books that they've read. And you'll be so glad you have that later on when they want to know, what did we do? Do you remember what we did in high school? So that's just from somebody who's paid the price for not doing that one year. I would encourage everybody to, keep up with those things with your kids, or have them keep up with it.
Definitely. Well, and something to think of too that you and I have talked about is, if you know that your child is college bound, look to a couple of the schools that they might be going to and find out what are the entrance requirements, so that as you're planning your high school courses, you're making sure to include things that would be required for that particular college. They're all going to have slightly different entrance requirements that they have. But just planning, being mindful of keeping track of things you think you might not need, and then discard them later if you don't end up needing them, and kind of keeping track as you go along. If you wait until, May of their senior year to even start a transcript, you're probably going to feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Whereas if you keep up with it a little bit, maybe year by year, keeping track, starting a basic transcript, there's lots of examples on the internet. On that homeschoolfreedom.com website I mentioned, there is a great article with a sample transcript. One of my favorite resources for homeschooling high school was a book by Mary Schofield, and she was a homeschool leader in California for many years. It's called The High School Handbook, Junior and Senior High at Home. And it's not one of those 400-page books that make you want to throw it out the day you get it. It's small, it's easy, it has lots of samples in it. So there's tons of resources like that will help you make a high school transcript. And so there's a little bit of a differentiation. There's record keeping for your whole homeschool journey, which depends on your state, depends on what you're saving it for. And then your transcript, which is really, since you are the homeschooling parent, you are graduating your child. You're saying when they have completed their high school education. And the transcript validates the diploma that you issue to your child. So that, just thinking about the transcript as a unique piece of your record keeping.
Nancy, that is so good. And one thing I want to do as we close, I just want to thank our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool, for sponsoring the podcast, and let you know, too, that with the BJU Press curriculum, especially with the videos, there's a product called the Hub. And the Hub actually you can keep a record of everything your student is doing. All of your students are doing K through 12 in the Hub. It's digital, it's easy, and with the videos, it just makes a great way to homeschool. And it takes, we call it painless planning. And if you were ever in homeschooling in the early years, painless planning sounds like, just like a little piece of heaven has come to earth. So I would highly encourage that. If you want to know more about that, you can go to homeschoolhelp.com /map and find a consultant in your area who can answer all your questions about the curriculum and the Hub and that painless planning.
It's so good. I want to give a little plug. My daughter's homeschooling using the BJU Press videos, and she loves the Hub. So it's a great resource to moms. But this has been so much fun. We just love answering questions, and we're going to do this again. So please go to zantyler.com, click on Explore the Podcast, and there is a link right there that you can record your question, and we would love to answer it on a future episode.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We've loved answering your questions. We hope you'll continue to send them in. And until next time, you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media, and you can find Nancy at nancymanos.com. We pray that the Lord continues to bless you and your family in your homeschooling. Thanks, and bye.